So our first step is obviously to come and have a look at this entity and see exactly what this entity is. So the best way to do that is just to have a look at the balance sheets and the profit and losses. You can look at that in the XML or the Excel. Obviously, the more years that you're dealing with, the more potential there is for complexity around the HPs and anything else where there's a limited amount of information in the initial structure. So if we have a quick look through here, what are we looking for? We're looking for relationships between items such as preliminary expenses, borrowing expenses, just to see if they run it with the amortization portion. Here they don't. So for us, it's really a case of having a look to see the naming conventions. Just take a quick look. There's not that many hire purchases. So we've got a couple of hire purchases there and a couple of hire purchases here. So only thing to consider is if you've got a whole lot more than 2 years of conversions, you may just have to pay a bit of extra attention to make sure that if the hire purchases are changing out and the naming conventions are very poor in the initial data set. What do we mean by poor naming conventions? Here's a perfect case, hire purchase. So the naming convention in the initial data set is really poor. There's not a lot of information there whatsoever. Hire purchase doesn't tell you a lot. Really what you'd expect is you'd expect a number associated either with the contract or with the asset, some sort of identifier. That would be the optimum data information carry. So here Holden's reasonably useful, and you know that the system's always going to break out Holden and then Holden with another number to distinguish between the initial found set of elements, which typically are going to be in the current, to what's in the non-current. So it'll always create a differential there in the initial XML. Once you've got that in place, it's worth just stepping through. Take a look at what type of business. Obviously, very little point trying to do a classification unless you know what type of business you're dealing with. What type of business it is will inform you as to where you're going to classify things. So, for instance, lease income. Lease income could almost be part of their actual core business operation, depending on the size. Or lease income could be a rent, or it could be just some sort of ancillary income. So it would only be a rent, obviously, if they owned the premises. So you'd have a look at the balance sheet to understand whether there was ownership of an asset, which would give rise to an investment type income, whether the income was possibly core to what the business is, in which case if it was primarily involved in leasing equipment out, obviously the lease would be a primary trade related line item. But if it was an ancillary, maybe subsidiary set of leasing something out, then maybe just a rental income of some sort. So, and not an investment income. So I think in the current taxonomy, certainly when it comes to leases, we do have an issue where we don't have anything in other income for lease income, and maybe we need to. But either way, you're then going to look through. You're going to see if there's anything large in here which possibly should be a direct cost. And if we have a look through consulting fees, so we see consulting fees is probably directly related to running the services out of what looks like a medical facility to us. You can just jump across, have a look at the secondary data set. See if there's any extra hire purchases in there. See if that's going to make any difference to what you're doing. There's not. So that sort of gives you an overview. Take a few minutes, understand the business, make all the difference in the world. Start with a fresh notebook, unless you're looking to do something like a consolidation or something. Open up the data. Open up the ACFX engine, and you're simply going to import. So we know we're going to bring in profit and loss and balance sheet first. Then you're going to import rules if there are rules. We'll try a separate operation in a moment with a situation where there are no rules. And if it's a partnership or trust, bring in the distributions, profit distributions for the 2 particular years. make sure that, and here this will take care of most of your line item naming for you. There's not a lot actually you have to do at this stage if everything's right in the XML. So assign that, and if you've got your rules all done, you're ready to process.